In this video, we'll talk a little bit about how the class is laid out and go through some of the conventions we'll be using as we explore the content for the different lessons and assignments, tutorials, and projects and things that we're going to do in the class this semester. Um, Obviously, we'll be using Blackboard for a lot of the work that we want to do, and I typically have a nice structure for Blackboard that allows you to easily identify the things that you need to get to. Um, the main area you want to be concerned with, the main sections are the sections over here on the left at the top where we have announcements, our Zoom meetings, the information about the class, the lessons, and you'll get a lot of the work that you need to do out of the lessons. The references, which are going to be very important as we go along through the class, and then the projects that we'll be doing and the quizzes and the final exam. This is where you'll get those particular artifacts from, and then you'll be submitting those to Grade Center along with the assignments that you'll have under the lessons. So Grade Center itself is right here. You have this submit to Grade Center, and this is what you'll use to submit your assignments, your projects, your final exam, extra credits. I think quizzes are submitted through that too. We'll find that out as we go through the semester. But anyway, I want to focus on these up here right now. We will have announcements. I use announcements a lot in this class. The class isn't just about reading some documents, doing some tutorials. You will learn as we go through it, and I will announce things as we go through it. I know there's a lot to cover in the classes themselves, and sometimes I use the announcements to give you a little bit more detail about things you might want to explore in the lessons on certain subjects. When things are really important, I like to send an announcement to make sure everybody focuses on those things. If there's any clarification that's needed on any of the topics, I utilize it for that. And then sometimes students will ask me a question, which I'll find that there might be something that everybody really needs to know about, and I'll utilize the announcements then to get the word out to everybody about how I answered those questions. So, excuse me, information about the assignments, the due dates, and all that. In the early part of the class, I'll use the announcements just to remind you about things, and then later on, after we've hit a pretty good cadence, I'm going to leave it up to you to make sure that you're doing things on time and getting things in. And every now and then I might have to give you a little bit of a pep talk. I'll do that through the announcements too. Also, anything that comes across from the university that I have to share with you, I'll utilize the announcements to do that. The announcements should, every announcement will also be sent to you in your email that's associated with Blackboard. So please, please, please check your emails frequently. I would say at least twice a day to make sure that you're not letting anything fall through the cracks. Really important to get this information in a timely manner. You will find that this course is highly regimented. I've taught it many times, and therefore I have a really good procedure for doing this. We cover a lot of ground, okay? There isn't a lot of room for hiccuping here, okay? We have to make sure we keep on task and keep on track. So please always refer to the information that's on Blackboard, and especially to the announcements as I give you guidance beyond what's provided in the syllabus through the announcements. The other section we have after announcements here is Zoom meetings. Right now, this class is mainly going to be taught in class, but there will be a couple times that we will meet through remote methods, and when we do, there'll be a Zoom meeting for that. If you go into the Zoom meeting section, you will see that there is a section here that says Zoom meetings. Right, by the way, you're seeing a lot of other things here because I'm in professor mode right now. If I go into your mode, this is what you would see. Okay, and it has the link to the Zoom meetings. Now, again, we'll talk about that when we do cover the class schedule, when we're actually going to plan to have Zoom meetings for this class. But most of the time we'll be meeting in class. The big section for you guys is the information section, and that's where we're going to have most of the stuff you need to read and the stuff you need to work with in this class. There are 8 lessons in this class, and then several seminars that we'll be doing. We'll start out with a couple seminars, which are basically me telling you about the subject, telling you about things that are important, that sets the foundation for the actual lessons we do, where we do work. Then we actually do work and try to learn the topics that are part of this class. So you'll see right off the bat that under information we have. Let me go back to information and click it. And right now it's just showing you the information for. Oh, I'm sorry. I said this all wrong. The information section is information about the class. Okay, that's where we have our syllabus and our class schedule. It also has information, miscellaneous information about the class. And of course, I want you to look through all this. Now, my VITA, it's not that important if you don't look at that, but it does tell you a little bit about my background and the fact that I've been teaching this class for quite a while. So I kind of know this subject a little bit. But anyway, beyond that, you do have the syllabus for the class here. I expect everybody to read that. In fact, know it intimately. And then the schedule for the class, the different sessions we'll have, and the topics we'll cover, and what will be assigned those nights, and then what will be due those nights are all in that class schedule. I'm going to have another video that I'll do where I'll actually go through that for this semester and show you the things that you need to be worried about. And then I shouldn't say worried about, but concerned about. And then miscellaneous information. These are just, usually when I in this class, I find that I get a lot of people who have some consternation that they know this is going to be a different class than they're used to getting. They're worried that it's going to uh, be beyond their ability to understand and contemplate and get through it. And I go through and tell you some of the basics about this, some of the things that try to offset your fears a little bit with this, okay? At the same time, trying to get the point across that there are certain key personal attributes that you'll want to work on that will help you get through this class, okay? And the main one is your time management. How you manage your time for this class is incredibly critical to what you'll end up getting out of it and what your final grade will be in this class. So I'll go through that too in one of the upcoming videos for the seminars. And then the lessons. This is actually where I said there's a section that has a lot of the information for this class. It's lessons where you'll have all the information that you will need to understand the subjects of the class, to do example tutorials for the class, to really roll up your sleeve and get your hands dirty on the different subjects that we're going to be covering, and then have assignments for the class. That will all be in here. Now, there'll be 2 types of lessons. One where there are mainly seminars, and others where they're actually the lessons of the class, the subjects that we want to cover in the class. So, for instance, right off the bat, in lesson L0, it's going to be the opening seminars for the class. And if you go in there, I actually have PDF files that show you those lessons. I'll go through the nomenclature here and the conventions in a second about how I name files. But anyway, you'll see that there's a file here of basic information about basics of information systems. That will be our first seminar, and then we'll do another seminar on the introduction to databases and Microsoft Access. Okay, you'll also see that there's some videos that you need to watch for these seminars. Okay, some of these were recorded in previous semesters, and I will let you know what you need to watch by saying watch next to it, and if it's optional, say optional to watch next to it. Right here, I want you, for instance, in this, I'd want you to watch both these videos to get a good understanding of this. The videos will really be exactly the same thing that what I'm going to cover in class. But at the same time, I think it's worth your while to watch them anyway. It's not bad to hear these things 2 or 3 times sometimes for it to really soak in. All right, back to lessons. I want to go to lesson 1. And again, we're going to have I think 8 lessons, and then actually with zero and there's a lesson Z. There's 10 altogether, but there'll be 8 that really are on subjects of information systems. And the first one we're going to cover in the class is about data representation. Again, I'm not going to get into that right now, but just to show you how a typical lesson is laid out. When you first start on a lesson, I will usually give you the lesson file. This L01 data representation PDF is the file that is that section of the workbook for the data representation subject. Okay, and we'll go through. I'll actually open this up in a minute, and we'll go through all the different sections of it so you can see those too. Okay, but let's right now just focus on what we have in Blackboard, different items that we want to deal with. So you'll have a lesson item, and then right after you'll have a video item. And these are the videos that go along with this. And again, sometimes these are from previous semesters. Sometimes they are things that are pre-recorded, not with students in the room, but I just recorded them on my own, kind of like how I'm doing this right now. I don't have students with me right now. But again, you'll see that some of these, I really want you to watch those, even though it's repeating things I'm going to say in class anyway. I still want you to watch it. And I will give you the option sometimes to even watch a couple semesters worth, okay? Usually I have the one that was closed, right now 2021 was the most frequent one. So I usually ask you to watch that one unless there was something in 2020 that I covered that I didn't get a chance to do in 2021. Usually then I would just mention it in a note to you or something like that. So on most of these you're going to have a watch, and it'll usually be the watch from fall 2021 right now. Okay. And then there's labs for this class. Okay, we won't always meet live, but you can go to the lab anytime you want and work on your lab stuff. Okay, labs are where you get to work on the tutorials for the class. And there's also a set of videos that you watch as part of those labs that teach you the basics of using Microsoft Access. This is not a class about me teaching you Access. And truth is, Access is pretty simple to learn, at least simple to learn from the perspective of how to do things. Okay, that doesn't mean it's simple to build a relational database, and that's what we're going to focus on in the class itself. All right, but things like how do you create a table, how do you create fields in a table, how do you set properties on the fields, and all that, we'll do a little bit of that. In fact, we're going to do a lot of that in the first lesson here. Okay, but I'm not actually going to show you how to type. Okay, you're going to come in already knowing how to do some of these things. And the way you're going to know that is by going through these things that say Lab Mastering Access videos. Okay, the Mastering Access videos there'll be some in each of the lessons, and those are basically the basics of using Microsoft Access. Now, while we're going to use those, okay, I want to warn you that they do not portray the naming conventions that we're going to use in this class. And I know that doesn't mean anything to you right now, but it will in a little while. I'm going to go through the naming conventions for objects, for fields, and for other elements of our database. Okay, but right now what I want you to do for the labs, and you don't have to wait till lab night to do this. You could do this at any time before. Okay, I give you the links. You go out there. They're YouTube videos. They're usually each very short. Most of them are less than 5 minutes, some just a couple minutes, in fact. Okay, and it just shows you really quick how to do a certain operation. You might want to do it along, make up something and do it along with them. Okay, but beyond that, you're also going to have tutorials that I give you. Okay, these will have videos that actually show you the procedure for how to do it. The tutorials are laid out in the lesson, step by step, how to do the tutorial. Then I actually give you a video where I do that tutorial. And they're not narrated, okay, but I do have them annotated so you know what step I'm on at any given time. And you can watch the video and pause it, and do the thing, go back, watch the video, pause it, do what I'm doing, just try to mimic what I'm doing going through it. Okay, this is most of the learning that students do in this class come in doing the tutorial videos. All right. And if you skip them, I guarantee it, you're not going to do well in this class. Okay. So you have to watch all these videos, and I give you a night to do all this. I give you a lab night to do this every so often. Again, we'll cover that when we do the class schedule. The files that say T01, your name is the tutorial file for tutorial T0-01. And you would take that file and then you would use that then to create the tutorial. In those, I will give you the objects that you need, the baseline objects that you need to do the tutorial, but then you're going to go in and you're going to customize them so that it does what the tutorial wants you to do. You will also typically, in all these, both for tutorials and assignments, get something that says compiled, okay, on it. Okay, T01-02 solution compiled. That's the solution for the tutorial. Now, I'm not giving you the solution yet. Okay, that will come later on after you've done the lab. I will expose other sections to this. Okay, and one of the sections will be the tutorial solutions. But I give you a compiled version of the solution right away so you could open it up and at least see what you ought to be getting. A compiled version basically shows you the application or the data sheet that you get where you can actually enter data into database and manage the database and all that, but it does not show you the definition of the database, what we call the design view of the database. All right, we are going to be designing databases in these tutorials and in your assignments and in your projects and everything we do. Basically, you're going to be designing databases. Okay, and I show you that solution after you've actually tried to do the tutorials and after I've shown you in class, because in class that's what I'm going to do for you too. And then you're going to work on the assignment, and after you're done with the assignment, I'll show you the solution for the assignments. But you can at least see how they should act after once you get done with it by going through the compiled version. Now, and I know this is probably not making a whole lot of sense to you right now, but it will as we go through the class. There are two kinds of compiled versions. One says compiled 32 and the other is compiled 64. Compiled 32 means that it's been compiled for a 32-bit architect computer. Okay, believe it or not, there are some of these things where it depends on the architecture of your computer whether or not the version of Access will work. All right, so these ones that are compiled 32 mean that they've been compiled in a 32-bit version of Access, which should run on both a 32-bit machine and a 64-bit machine. Okay, now gotta be careful about that. I found that doesn't always work on every 64-bit machine. Sometimes you have to partition the machine in order to get it to run 32-bit. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. I'm just telling you that the odds are one of these will run on your computer. Okay, most people nowadays have 64-bit computers and laptops. You would want to use the compiled 64 version on it then. Okay, you might be able to use the compiled 32 on a 64 is what I'm saying. Okay, but I would go with the one that is actually fits your bit architecture on your computer, and you can find it out looking under the system information for your computer, what bit structure you have. All right. The one thing I know for sure won't work is if you try to open a 64-bit on a 32-bit computer. In fact, the one I'm working on right now is a 32-bit computer, and if I tried to run this right now, it wouldn't work. Okay. But anyway, all these files, you want to download them to your PC or your laptop to work with them. Do never open them right here from Blackboard. You could have all kinds of problems. Okay, and that includes the PDF files. I would even download those, even though those tend to open up all right. If I just double click and look at it, I would still download those and open it up from an Adobe Reader or something like that. But anyway, this one that says T0. T01-02 data representation table specification is a kind of an outline of what needs to what the fields are. Okay, this is just an excerpt of what came out of here. Okay, the same information is here. Again, when we do individual lessons, I'll go through each of these again. Right now, I just want to give you an idea of how this all is structured on Blackboard. Now, if I'm going to get out of student mode and go to professor mode again here, because I'm going to show you the sections you're not seeing right now. There'll be a tutorial solution section where typically what will happen is after I go through the tutorial in class, I will immediately expose this. So you will work on this lab night. The next night we will typically get together. I'll go through the tutorial then, okay? And then I'll expose these solutions so you can see them. We will not turn in the tutorials in this class, but you will work them. All right. If you just wait for me to do the tutorial and sit there watching me, I guarantee you're not going to learn this class. This is your chance to really learn the class by doing the tutorials. Okay, it is the place where you are getting your hands dirty. It's the places where you're going to have problems. And if you have problems and you can't figure them out, and I hope you can, but if you can't, then it gives you a chance when we do meet for when I do the tutorials to ask me what's going on, and I might be able to give you a little bit more detail to help you out. Plus, if you've had a problem, then you see me do it and see that I don't have a problem, then you'll realize maybe what you were doing wrong. So, also very soon, I mean, usually even when I have assigned after I've assigned the lab, I'll also expose the assignment right away, so you can look at that. So if you're as you're doing the tutorial, you could think about they're usually very they won't be the same problem obviously, but they'll be the same type of work. Okay, again, you do the people who do the tutorials and do well on the tutorials usually have no problem with the assignments or the projects in this class. And again, I will expose this, and then what you'll have in there is you'll have something describing the assignment. This A01 data representation.pdf describes what I want you to do in these assignments. In this particular one, you're going to have two parts, a 1 and a 2, and those are going to be different subject tables that we're going to be building for this class, for the lesson, I should say. And then A0101, its solution, I'm going to give you a compiled version of that, both in 32 and 64-bit again, okay? And you will follow what's called the naming conventions when you create your objects and your fields in the databases. This .accdb file, these ACDB files, those are Access database files. I am going to give you those with the baseline objects that you need, and then you're going to tailor those and customize them in order to do the things that need to be done in both the tutorials and the assignments, okay? And then after you turn in the assignment, I will try to very soon after that expose the solution. All right. I don't accept late work at all because we move fast in this class. And if I have to wait, that means I have to wait to expose the solution. That's not fair to the people that are keeping up. So don't be surprised if 10 minutes after the assignment's been submitted, I already exposed the solution. And once the solution's exposed, there's no way I'm going to accept any work at that point. So get everything in on time. But anyway, this is a typical layout for every lesson that we'll go through. Lesson videos, lab, tutorials, tutorial solutions, assignment, and assignment solution. And you'll see that repeated throughout the whole thing. As we go through class, there will be certain fundamental topics that we'll learn that I can summarize a little bit better for you. That will be a nice thing for you to go to when you're struggling with things. And I call these the references. Now the first two references, well, we're actually going to do the first two references here in a minute, okay? R0, which are the course conventions for this course, and then RA, which is the naming conventions for what you'll do in Access. But after that, then you'll see things like there's a key summary and a field control activation property summary. These are all basically tables, most of them, that summarize the different aspects of each topic and lay it out in a way that you see a lot of really interesting relationship between the different subjects that we cover in the database. Again, we're not going to get into any of this tonight, but as we go through the class, each lesson will introduce one of these, and then from that point on, that reference applies. So a lot of times you'll go in and you'll see the lesson, and it may reference go CRB the key summaries. Okay, that's because in that lesson I introduced what keys are all about. But keys apply from everything from there on out. So you want to make sure that you come back and visit that every now and then, and they build on each other. They do kind of follow a flow, not entirely, but they do kind of follow the flow of the subjects that we're going to cover in this class. And then I've got a few things in there, especially toward the end, that are a little bit additional information. You know, things that we covered earlier on in class, where I told you a very simplistic way because I didn't want to confuse you too much. But I usually will tell you there's more to this than I'm telling you right now. And then later on, you've got some things that actually get into that greater detail when it makes a lot more sense to you. The other references that we'll use are the checklist. Now there aren't too many of them, okay? But for some for some objects, tables and forms, for instance, there is a set way of doing it. And what I've done is I've taken, and it really follows the set way of our tutorials. But then what I've done is I've taken and created a checklist so that when you created, say, a subject table, you could go out and pull out this checklist, go through it and say, did I do all the things I need to do in order to create a subject table? Same thing for a subject form or any form, really. Okay, but actually a subject form. And then much later in class, when we learn how to actually create an application where we actually are creating a runtime version of the things that we produce, there'll be a checklist for that. Okay, these are very handy. Okay, I've had students tell me that they really got a lot. This really helped them make sure that they weren't missing anything as they went through it. There tends to be an order to things, not always, and so I have tried to capture that order as best as I could in these tables. So you can basically utilize them to say, did I do this? Check. Did I do this? Check. And you can actually build your table going down that list and say, okay, this is what I need to do first, this is I need to do second, whatever else. Of course, like as I said, you will have the tutorials that will also have that information in it. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out in going through all this is you notice that all these files that I have here are usually preceded by some with a prefix. Okay, all the ones that are references start with the letter R, and then they have some other code just to distinguish each one of them. Okay, so R0 is the course conventions because it's basically about the class. Okay, RA it's really the most important of all the references and the one you will use the most, where we're going to have our access naming conventions that you will use throughout this whole class. And then all the other references, and they're just laid out like that. The letters themselves usually don't mean a whole lot, except I've got this one that says RV course links. In fact, I need to take that one out. It doesn't belong there right now, but I will have a one that summarizes the course links from this. And then there's and I'm sorry, the course video links, and I put that on V just so it had the video moniker on it. But anyway, I may take that one out. We'll see. But you see, this the checklists have CL on them. And if I go back to our lessons and I open up data representation again, you'll see the lesson book itself as L as its moniker, okay, or its indicator, I should say, its identifier. Tutorial files all start with the letter T, and then it goes T, the lesson we're in, and then what part of that lesson. So this is tutorial for lesson 01, and it's the first tutorial in that lesson. This is the second tutorial in that lesson. When you look at the workbook, you'll see it's the sections that relate to this are labeled that way too. A means assignment, and in fact, now that I've done all this, and again, that's pretty much, again, projects are going to have a similar look, where you'll go in there and you'll have an item for each project as we get to them. Quizzes, same thing, and the final exam, the same thing, but those are down the road yet, so we won't get too heavily involved in those right now. Right? But what I wanted to show you is the conventions for naming these files right now. And so I'm going to go to this now. This is R0, the reference R0, course conventions, and you'll see for the files that are on Blackboard, here are all the letters that you will see on files. L again are the lessons for the lesson work for the workbook file. T's are the tutorials. A's are our assignments. X's are extra credits, and you didn't see any of them out there yet because I haven't posted those yet, okay? And I usually don't until we're about ready to do it, all right? But I do give some extra credit assignments, and when I do that, you'll know them because they have the letter X on it, and they'll be in a section that says extra credit too under those lessons. Seminars are denoted with an S. E is an example that usually comes out of one of the lessons, and I just strip it out to put into a file by itself because sometimes people like to print those off and have them with them when they're working. And the same thing with image files. An image file is just a JPEG that might show, like, for instance, the schema of a database, the structure of the database, and you might want to have that separate to print it out so you don't have to print out the entire document. There aren't too many of those. Projects are usually prefixed with a P, and the quizzes and the exam with a Z. References, as I showed, are R's, and then checklists are CL. So pretty good a way of understanding how things go together. Again, if you have lesson 2, you'll have tutorials for 2 that say T02. You'll have assignments that have A02. If there was an extra credit, it'd be X02. Any examples or image files might have O2 on them. That means they all go together. They're all part of the same thing. Okay. Now where that's a little bit different though is when you come down to the projects and quizzes, they will say O2 and O3, but that has nothing to do with the lessons. Okay. That just has to do with the fact that in the order of doing projects, in the order of doing quizzes, that's the number they have. All right. So the other conventions are the conventions of the workbook itself. The workbook itself, again, is these L files that we have. So I'm going to go back to the Blackboard again, and I'm going to open up I'm going to open up one of those L files. I'll do it right from here because I know I can do a PDF file, open it directly from here. And it takes a little bit when I'm recording for this thing to come up. Here it comes, finally. Blah, 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 blah. By the way, usually if you have a PDF file, if you have Adobe Acrobat Reader, it will usually default to that. But if it doesn't, it might have to open it up in your browser like it's doing for me right now. And why it's taking so long, I just don't know. I might have to go out and do this a different way. Oh boy, what is going on here? It's saying it's not responding. Bear with me for a second. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go out and open it myself from my Blackboard, from my Explorer. I hope I didn't just lock up my machine here. Oh no, it came back. I'm sorry. All right, we're good. So what you'll have at the beginning of each of these lessons file is a little thing that says lesson L01. Okay, this is kind of like a outline of everything that's of the content of this lesson. So we'll give a little bit of a scope about what the lesson's about, a little bit about it, insight about what we're about to learn, and then the content itself, where you'll have fundamental, which is basically an explanation about what this particular topic is. So right now in this lesson we have 2 topics, subject table and data sheet. So we'll start out with a fundamental about what is a subject table. And then we're going to have conventions, and the conventions actually go for the entire lesson. I should have this going through the whole thing, but the conventions are basically naming conventions that apply to the things that we're learning in this lesson. These are the things that come from that RA reference that says Access Naming Conventions, and I'll show you the summary of those for this in a second. And then we may have some examples. We don't always have examples, but we may have some examples that go along with the fundamentals that we're talking about. In this case, we're going to have 2 for the subject table. And then we're going to have a tutorial. And we could have multiple tutorials for each fundamental too, okay? This one only has one. We're going to have it has T01's A and B. Oh, B's data sheet. I'm sorry, right. Okay, so there actually should be a T01-02 on here. Oh, it does. It's got it right here. I'm sorry. It's right here. Okay, so these are the tutorials. This one is particular to a subject table. This one's particular to a data sheet. And then we're going to do one that covers both of them. at the same time. Okay, we're going to do them both. We're going to cover both topics together. This is kind of the practice for your assignment. This T01-02, and then there's a section called 5T. I'll show you that when we get down there. Okay, I usually talk about this is what assignment is going to be associated with this. So you can relate that back to Blackboard. And then again, the references that come into play for this particular subject, beside the CA or the RA one and the R01 actually. Okay, anything that was before still it counts for this one too. But that we're saying we're introducing RB key summary into this one. Keys are very important in doing our tables. So the next section then will be the conventions, and this is a snippet that comes right out of RA naming convention.pdf. And you will, by the way, when I refer to a file, I will always have it in this green shade. And again, you'll see these conventions in a second for how things are color coded here. Okay, but these are all color coded, and those colors have meaning, and I'll cover those in a minute. Okay, but you can see in this we're going to be concerned about the naming convention for a subject table. In naming conventions, I always give you what the template is, and then what an example of it, one would be. So this would be one for a table for vehicles that you want to keep track of. This is how we would name it. There's conventions for the key, and as it is, we're not necessarily going to use those. I'll show you a way to do this other than having the prefixes that we use, where you can say primary key and alternate key. It makes it a lot easier. But anyway, these are all, and then the field ones are the important ones. And the ones that are in green are the ones that we will use a lot in the class. The ones in yellow we will use once in a while. The ones in red we will never use. I don't know why they even have them in Access, to tell you the truth, okay? There's usually a better way of doing it. Or it's just something that we are just not going to have the need to do, okay? But I could see that if you ever developed a table for a scientific database, you might need a table that has scientific. Well, why would you do that for currency? Probably not. Okay, I don't know why they have that in there. Anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get off track a little bit, but the yellow ones are usually ones where you could do it in Microsoft Access, but there's another way to do it. And again, I'll go through all this when I do the explanation of the naming conventions themselves. Okay, but right now I just want to let you know that the second section of the workbook will always have naming conventions for the class in it, for that section in it. Or I'm sorry, for that lesson in it. Okay. Then we get into fundamentals, and fundamentals are where we really, this is the story basically. These are, but I tried to break it out in the structure. You're going to find out that in this class, structure is everything. Not only in the databases we're producing, but how we learn about databases. So I use the technique called information mapping to basically explain to you what a subject table is. And I do that by saying, this is a subject table. It's the concept of doing representation in a database. This is what it really represents. Here's some examples of it. This is its purpose. Here are some related topics to it. It's the table properties, the fields, the values of the fields, the properties of the fields, the scheme of the table itself, which is the set of fields in the database, the record, and then the keys. And the keys are incredibly important. We'll spend a lot of time on that in our first lecture class, going over the keys for the table. Information about the keys then, and again, these are color coded, and the color coding means something. I'll go into that in a minute. There's a little bit about terminology mapping. Now, I will tell you something. There's a lot in subject tables, okay? We usually won't have that much in the fundamental sections, okay? Subject tables, though, it turns out it's the most important thing in our database, and we're going to cover it. Subject tables and the keys of the table are the most important things that we're going to talk about, and we're going to do it right off the bat. Okay, so there's more information to know about those than anything else. But you have to do a good job on them, because if you don't, the rest of your database will just not be very good. So then I may have some examples. So here you've got an example of an example. Examples E01-01A. And I've even got a second one there where we show a different twist on that. Again, we're going to get these really soon in the class. And then you'll have your tutorials. So again, you'll have the videos of me doing the tutorials, but here is the step-by-step instruction that I am following. And as I go through the videos, you'll see me flash step 3. This is step 3. Okay, or here's your explanation of how you do it. So this is a very workbook oriented thing. You see it's got a lot of notes on it. Those notes mean something. The color coding of the notes means something. Again, I'll get into that in a minute. And you see I've done a lot of screen captures, so what you see on the screen should be very similar to what you see here. Different versions of Access may have a little bit of a different look, but for the most part, it's got the same information in it. If it doesn't, I make note of that. And I don't think that happens very often, to tell you the truth. Okay, and then goes through the whole thing, and then gets into the next fundamental, the data sheet fundamental. And then we go through a tutorial about that. There wasn't any example for that, but we go through a tutorial. And then we finally wrap it up by doing a tutorial, which is kind of a dress rehearsal for doing the assignment. And you'll basically take this information that I give you about the fields of a subject table, and you'll go back and utilize you'll basically utilize this tutorial, the procedure that you had in T01-01A, and then these notes that I give you on the procedure, just so you know that there are some delta differences, okay? And I think that's it for that. And then finally, at the very end of every lesson, you're going to have a section that's called the 5 T's. Tips, tricks, traps, truths, and twists, okay? This is basically a summary of all the key points that you just covered above, with some additional insight to things that are a little bit unusual, especially things that are unusual in Microsoft Access. These ones that are twists are all things where if you read a book about Access, or if you've ever done Access before, you probably have done it a different way. And I'm telling you, there is a better way to do it than what they've shown in those books, and especially a better way that would allow you to use another kind of database system. You would be able to use it a lot quicker. Okay, so I know a lot of you are thinking beyond Access. You might use SQL Server or Oracle or one of the other relational databases. I'm trying to teach you the fundamentals of information systems. In doing that, you're going to learn a lot about the fundamentals of relational database systems too. Not just about how they work with Microsoft Access, but also how they work in other software packages. And these twists will basically tell you a better way than what Microsoft says you ought to do in Access, okay? That would work in other database systems then. Because believe it or not, Access doesn't translate very readily into other database systems. But there's other things like, the truths are things that are absolutely fundamental. The tips are things that, this is a good idea. You don't necessarily have to do it, but it's a good thing to do. Tricks are things where it can really speed things up. It's something that isn't documented well, but something I know about that could really help you out if you know how to do this little trick. And then traps are the things you really need to avoid at all costs. Now I'm going to tell you, this section called 5T is something that most students will look to after they learn the subject and learn the elements of building an information system, and have gone through and have mastered lessons as they're going along. This is what they usually refer back to. And I've been told from a lot of them that when they took the quizzes and the final exam, that most of what they learned, and I admit that, these are the key things in the class, truthfully. So you go here to look through that, you're going to have, if you understand these, you're usually going to do fairly well on the projects and final. Not that you don't have to read the other stuff, you do have to do that too. All right, so that's the sections of the workbook, and now I'm going to go back to my course conventions, and you'll see that I told you that those sections of the workbook are color coded. These are what those colors mean. For instance, if you get a blue, it means just a general instruction or a note. If it's green, it's a instruction about the particular tutorial that you're working on. You can see in here those truths, tips, tricks, traps, and twists, uh, along with the pink that goes with the twist. You know, those are not just at the end there; they're scattered throughout where they are brought up basically in that lesson. So, if there was a tip about um, how to utilize the compact and repair, to help you eliminate a problem that might happen in your database. Usually I will say that somewhere in the lesson and give it a tip of and make it a blue background, and then I will say it again in the 5 T's. But there may be other things in the 5 T's that I didn't say up above, so I'll always read the 5 T's. Then I have some conventions for the font itself. That bold means something. That if it's in these brackets, it means that it's an object or a field of some kind. Property names are usually this orange color. Property values are this blue color. Then I've got file names are that faded green that with bold letters. Attention's usually in red. And if you're colorblind, I apologize. I try not to use red that much, but sometimes I have no choice. But anyway, I've got attention on there, and if you are colorblind, let me know. By the way, I'll try to I'll give you something to help you out on that. And then the general names and indicators, I just make it italics so it stands out from the regular text. So that's the workbook color codes and text styles, okay? And then again, we have this this access naming conventions. In those naming conventions, which I'm not going to, I'll cover that in a different video here. Okay, in those naming conventions, you're going to have this light green means this is a convention that we will use frequently in building database systems. Yellow, we may once in a while, but it's pretty sporadic. Red, it's very seldom used. In fact, most of the time when it's this light red, I don't understand why Access even put it together. It's not needed. There may be another field format that's better than that field format. So just be aware. That's how I color coded those. This one that's yellow with a dotted background, the fuzzy background on it. It's an object that's either being replaced by another object, or is handled better by another object, or it's optional since Access generates a name for it. And again, I know that doesn't mean a whole lot to you, but as we go through the class, it will make more sense. And then anything with a red background are things that I think you need to avoid like the plague. Microsoft puts some things in Access that just are wrong. I mean, I'm going to say it out loud. It is wrong, and it will cause you a lot of grief, okay? And it really, some of the stuff they have in there actually violates the principles of doing what's called normalization of data, which is one of the key things that we're going to try to do in this class. So these things, even though they're there, I am telling you not to do them, okay? Stay away from them, okay? There is a rule of thumb that we go by when we talk about naming things in databases, and it's very simple. If it's an object, you need to use the naming conventions to indicate what kind of object it is. If it's a field inside a table, you need to use a convention to say what kind of field it is, okay? Other than that, I don't ask you to, the things that are automatically generated by Access, I don't ask you to rename them typically, okay? Except in the case when we have to write a macro or something else like a conditional rule that references a control or another object that's on our form or report, okay? Usually it's on our form, all right? Now, I know that doesn't mean anything to you, okay? We won't have to do this a lot of times, but when we do, it's critical, okay? We will find out as we go through that objects can actually reference other objects in our database. But in order to do that, we have to know the name of the object. Access will usually generate a name for it, but the name is really cryptic. And it doesn't help you at all if you have to debug it. Okay, so what we usually will do is if we have something we need to reference, we'll go back and we'll rename those things so it does have a good name. It has a naming convention that keeps us from getting in trouble. Right? Again, I will explain that a lot more when I do the video for RA. But these are the conventions for the class and pretty much how we lay out where things are. So get to know your your Blackboard site and understand that I will be revealing items on that site as they're needed. Okay, I don't give you everything right away. Okay, as we go through this, there's going to be a cadence, and you'll pick up what that cadence is. Early going on, whenever I reveal something, I'll let you know that I've revealed it. Okay, I'll either do that through an announcement or I'll tell you in class. But the bottom line is you will need to use Blackboard religiously in this class. If you don't, you will not get through it. So that's this video, and again, we'll go on and we'll do another one about RA and the access naming conventions.